and featuring speaker Guljeet Nagpal, Senior VP of Product Strategy at ACCELQ. I am your moderator, Gretchen Young. Thank you for joining. Before I hand it off to our speaker, let me explain your console here. You can expand your control panel by clicking the orange arrow at the top. That's where you'll find your options to post questions as well as where you can download the ACCELQ brochure. If you experience technical issues, you can submit it through the chat that's located at the bottom of your control panel. We'll be watching that and handling them for you. This is an interactive session, so feel free to submit your questions as we go along. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Senior VP of Product Strategy, Guljeet Nagpal.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you all for joining us this morning, afternoon, and for some of you, evening, right? I see some folks joining from Europe and APAC as well. So thanks for joining us. My name is Guljeet Nagpal, and I lead the product strategy here at ACCELQ. I spent 10 plus years with Mercury, so pretty much seen the evolution of our quality testing tool and getting to the top of the market before we got acquired with HP and so on, right? So excited to bring this webcast to you from ACCELQ and share what ACCELQ has to offer in terms of continuous testing and to our topic, right? Automating the complete quality life cycle. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to run through a few slides and then actually do a live demo of the platform ACCELQ product itself. So if you're able to follow along the screen, I'm going to share some slides, and don't be confused with what you see on my first slide. It is still very much a testing quality webcast, right? So, if you see some of these interesting graphics, right, back, around World War II, anthropologists actually discovered almost like a new religion, new belief, which then later got called as cargo cult, which got really started gaining popularity, and it was kind of on the rise, especially around the South Pacific Islands, right? And what they found after they really looked into it was, around World War II, some of these superpowers would use, these islands, and they created their air bases to kind of, go to have their cargoes and launch attacks and what have you, right? And to get cooperation from the locals at these islands, they would actually drop, cargoes for the locals, like, a whole bunch of goodies, right? And it went on obviously for a long time, until the war was on, right? And the locals got obviously used to it, and they used to love the fact that, all these things would happen, and then, they would get all these goodies dropped from the sky. Right, so obviously when the World War ended, everything stopped, and they were kind of in dismay that what happened. So locals were smart. They used to notice, the whole system around, the air bases and the traffic control. So they actually recreated the whole system, right? So if you see on my screen, they recreated the satellite towers, the walkie-talkies, even the air, the runways, the aeroplanes, and the whole 9 yards on the receiving end of it, right? And it almost became like a ritual which they followed, and it spread virally across all these islands, and it later got widely known as the cargo cult belief, and it got because it spread virally over a period of time, it gained so much popularity that it became a lot more than just the goodies about the cargo goodies, right? And obviously, to their distraught, it didn't work, right? It didn't. The cargoes didn't magically start coming. So what really struck me, and the reason I'm sharing this story with you all is, our testing and our quality engineering discipline, especially when it comes to test-driven development and shift left, is in a very similar state, right? We follow a lot of rituals. We put a lot of process in place without really looking, ground up what is necessary to really reap the benefits, and then we kind of magically expect, right, the testing to become a lot faster and align with the continuous delivery, right? But as we all know, right, testing unfortunately still remains to be reactive and slow, and let's be honest, it is considered as an overhead, right? So coming back to our agenda, right? That's exactly what we're going to walk through in the next hour. We're going to look into the next level of detail, right? In terms of where are some of those inefficiencies, right? And what is really needed ground up in terms of automating the complete quality life cycle, right? It shouldn't be just about test case automation. It should be really identifying across the life cycle all bottlenecks, and then approaching them to bring efficiencies, right? So I'm going to move along and go to the next level of detail. But before I do that, I want to make sure I don't put you all to sleep with a few slides I'm going to go through. So let's do a quick poll. Just want to understand the story I shared and the relevance to what I shared. Does it kind of resonate with you as well? So Gretchen, if you can help launch the poll, please. Okay, it looks like the poll's open. Okay, thanks, Gretchen. Gretchen, by the way, we weren't able to hear you. Okay, so maybe you're having a little bit of audio issue, but
How's
thanks.
that?
Yeah, that's perfect. No worries, you're back. So thanks for launching and the poll. So I see a lot of results coming back coming in, and thanks for responding. Right, and it's interesting. I'm getting about 70% yays on how on how you related back to your organization. So good to see the responses and relevance to the story, right? So let's move along, right? So if we look into the next level of detail, in terms of continuous delivery, if we look at deployment, release, build, these disciplines, have come a long way in terms of aligning themselves to continuous delivery, right? And really enabling, faster executions across the life cycle, right? Operationally, if we look at it, I mean, the release timelines and the actual operational aspect of the build and release aspect has come down from weeks, what used to take weeks to literally seconds, right? The workflows and the automation aspects which have got part of these disciplines, right? But if we look at our quality engineering and testing discipline, I mean, we suffer pretty low. We're still kind of stuck in even test automation percentages, right? If we look at it, in sprint automation suffers a really low 10 to 20% of automation, right? And that was based on a latest survey which was done, right? And apart from test case automation, if we look at the across the life cycle, there is really not much automation. I mean, test design, a whole lot of things are still manual, right? So that's let's kind of look under the covers of this, right? So that we can then approach it in a way that it's we can be more specific around the solutions we bring to the table. So if we look at a typical agile methodology, right, multiple sprints before you go live, and for a typical application which is a hybrid application, right, consisting of both components and GUI and so on, right? And if you look at it, test automation would always have a lag of at least a sprint plus two, right? And what that does is, it creates a snowball effect. So by the time all your sprints have ended and you're ready to go live, your regression because you're now already introduced a sprint plus 2 lag in your automation, because by the time your application is stable and available to be able to automate, it's already 2 sprints behind, and then you're creating a whole snowball effect. So your regression then obviously gets that much delayed, and by the time your regression suite is ready, your sprints have already ended, which then introduces an additional phase, right? And it kind of is counterintuitive to Agile itself, right? Because if you're then going about doing your defect fixes and changes and kind of going back to your sprint one, it almost defeats the purpose, right? And even within test automation, I mean, the overhead it brings, every now and then we hear from most of our customers, right, that it's not bringing the ROI, so is it even worth? And there is a lot of misconception out there, right, when it comes to Agile testing. We hear that, oh, but I'm doing a lot of API testing, or if I'm doing a lot of unit testing. Obviously, API testing is necessary, unit testing is necessary, and in fact, we're going to talk about it, that how API also kind of lives in its own world rather than being done in the same flow, right? But that doesn't mean that it covers up for the lack of functional automation testing, right? And automation in that area, right? So where I'm trying to get at is we got to kind of get to the root cause of this, right? And dependency is one of the really big things. We've kind of all taken this for granted, that if my application is not available, I can't automate. But there's got to be a solution where you are able to do automation along with when your application is getting developed, right? Pretty much in parallel to when your application code is being written, right? There's got to be a better way, right? So let's try to kind of create our perfect wish list, right? And feel free to chat in your comments and questions here, right? Uh, so if we create that perfect wish list in terms of having tackling the dependency, a true test-driven development would not mean, if I go back to my story, would not mean, just following the rituals of test-driven development, but somehow removing that dependency, right? Removing the application the application availability dependency, even the application stability dependency, because we all know that initial cycles of sprint, my business process is never going to have an end-to-end readiness, right? And my application is going to obviously keep going up and down and so on, right? So there's got to be a way where I'm able to completely automate this within the same flow, not just do UI, but also be able to handle the complete flow as in early sprints your application would require. Right, and really have entire team participate in the automation rather than just being done in silos, right? And if we look into the next level of detail, right? If you look at that software test life cycle, why do we say that testing is reactive? Why do we say that the testing is kind of an overhead, right? Because if you look at our the process and the process and the tools which have only made incremental changes along the last 10 years, ever since the Mercury tools have incepted, right? They pretty much act in silos, right? Within the testing life cycle, your manual testing remains to be a completely different silo than your automation, right? Automation pretty much lives on its own island with its own specialist functions. And even manual testing, if you look at it, the test design is completely, manual, right? What I mean by that is, you pretty much have a guy kind of sitting and scratching their heads and trying to figure out, how do I make sure that my coverage is optimal for all the permutations and combinations of validations I need to do for my application, right? Doesn't make sense. I mean, in this day and age, there's got to be a more scientific way to go about doing my test design, right? So that it tells me optimally what my coverage should be for my application, right? And this whole process of your test lifecycle should really not be driven by phases. It should really be driven by your business process, right? The focus should be on what you're validating, while what really ends up happening is, because of a complex process with so many handoffs, the focus suddenly shifts on more on the technical side rather than what you're trying to validate. And then obviously comes the big kind of the infamous handoff, right, from manual to test automation, right, where everything kind of starts reinventing the wheel. You've gone through your manual test design, then automation kind of takes over. It's a specialist function. A whole new set of team comes in and then starts doing automation design, which is different from manual design, right? Because now automation design is so much more technically driven that they have to think about custom frameworks, reusability. Then they have to, depending on the tool, and every single tool out there, obviously needs some level of coding, even if they say that they are record and play or what have you, right? There is a level of technical complexity and barrier involved in writing the automation code to catch up with today's technology. And then comes, obviously the code maintenance, right? In every sprint, you're going to have changes to be able to maintain those. And these, if we take a step back, these end up challenging the value and of automation itself. And no wonder our survey showed that your automation percentages across industry struggle at 20 to 30%, right? And I'm not even talking about the fact that microservices, soap testing, and all these again live in its own islands with its own specialist functions, right? But while the reality is in a complex hybrid application, if I'm on sprint one, it's got to be able to kind of test in one flow, right? So these are some of the key things we want to talk about today, right? That how do we bring automation to complete quality life cycle, right? And in terms of test design, in terms of test generation, in terms of automating the automation itself, right? In terms of having one integrated process. So I've kind of been going on for a while. Let me take a quick pause. Let's do a quick poll. Let me try to understand if some of these really resonate with you all, right? What are some of the top challenges you face in your automations when it comes to especially your automation strategy? So Gretchen, again, if you can help launch the second poll, please.
Of course. I will open the poll here. You will see the poll open on your webcast screen, and it will give you the option to submit. I'll keep it open for 15 seconds, so please go ahead and choose your answers now. Okay, polls are closed.
Perfect. Thank you, Gretchen. Interesting. Let me take a second and look at the responses. And then again, thanks for being interactive here. So very interesting, right? So we had 4 options in terms of what are the top challenges, and it looks like barrier to automation, custom frameworks is one of the top ones, and then interestingly the highest percentages is around change maintenance of your automation code. So good to hear. I'll keep that kind of in focus as we go along. That these were the top 2 challenges from majority of you which came along, right? So if we, again, we, enough about challenges. I mean, we all know there are challenges with every aspect, right? But let's kind of try to walk through, again, in a perfect world, right? Given this software, the testing life cycle we just looked at, and the various bottlenecks we identified, right? In a perfect world, let's look at what would really be an optimized approach to kind of bring an easy and adaptable solution across these challenges, right? So one of the biggest things we identified was the silo between the manual and automation, right? So having kind of one integrated process, right? Not having all these as separate islands, right? In terms of manual automation, UI, database testing, REST testing, SOAP testing, got to be able to do this in a single flow, right? And then not relying I didn't touch on too many on change management challenges, because we kind of kept going down the path of challenges. But we all know, and you guys identified in your poll, change management is one of the biggest issues, right? So not relying on the old school traceability only way of doing change impact, right? There's got to be a more automated way where your scripts and your automation and your scenarios adapt to the changes, right? And are more intelligent and not just rely on your application requirements being in sync, which and honestly in today's world is not the case. Your application changes so fast that you're not able to keep your requirements always in sync, right? As your application goes along, right? So got to be a better way in terms of keeping the change management more real time, right? And then really coming this coming this circle full circle in terms of bringing automation across test design, right? Having a more scientific way to go about doing test design, right? More algorithmic approach, right? Test generation, right? Really looking at an approach where my various permutations and combinations of my test cases are driven from business rules, right? And not driven from a technical perspective, right? And then bringing that change management within, bringing that automation within the change management, right? And then obviously once I have these bottlenecks more automated and more optimized, then I'm able to support my continuous delivery and what my CI needs are, right? So with that, what I'm going to do in the next 40 minutes or so is walk you through the product, right? Walk you through the platform and how ACCELQ approaches this, right? And I'm going to talk less and actually show you a live demo of the product so that we can have the product speak for itself. And then please keep it interactive as you've been responding. The best way to kind of go through the product overview is for you guys to ask questions so that we can get you best understanding of the product itself, right? So if I have to give you a quick overview of the platform before I get into the capabilities, right? We are we are an end-to-end testing platform, right? It supports web API, database, any kind of JMS Q validations, right? Very, very business process driven, and we'll see that in a minute as I dive into the platform. We're actually the only product in quality and automation space today, which is zero IDE. It's completely browser based. We don't have any kind of vendor locks, and offered both on cloud and on premise. And then some of these details I'll get into more, right? So just real quick before I dive into the live demo, at a capability level, I want to share at least the highlights of the key capabilities on how some of these address some of the challenges which we talked about, right? And the automation which need to be brought to the complete life cycle, right? So one of the key things we've brought to this discipline and from a very innovative perspective is something which we call as quality driven development. We talked about dependency, right, being one of the core issues, and taken for granted that you obviously can't do your automation until until your application is stable or available, right? So quality driven development brings capabilities like application abstraction. What application abstraction means in ACCELQ's world is you are able to abstract your complete application down to the level of detail, so that you're basically developing your complete automation code right when you're developing your application, right? So by the time I'm finished with the coding of my application, my actual automation assets are ready, and I'm able to expedite my automation effort by up to 70%, right? And what that does is it basically increases your automation, which suffers today from 10 to 20% because of this key dependency, right? And you're too late in the game, and it gives you a huge kickstart, right? So you know, and this is applicable both even if your application is under development or if it's not stable enough, and you got to be able to develop all your automation assets, right? I'll talk about predictive designer probably best while I show the demo. But you know, we have a concept of application universe, which kind of, you know, pretty much drives it in terms of a predictive behavioral driven designer, right? And I'll show that in a moment. But our automation is completely codeless. It's natural language based. You know, there is even to handle all levels of complexity of today's application, and inclusive of not just UI, but inclusive of your database, your queues, or your REST testing, or what have you, right? Completely codeless. And you know, again, we're not talking about any Excel frameworks or any kind of custom frameworks. We're talking about, you know, one integrated process, right? So you know, that was our principle, right? The lifecycle automation in one process. We don't want multiple islands, right? And then bringing you know, automation into change management, and really kind of going the next level of automation, right? Not just traceability level of automation, but really being able to self-heal. For instance, your automation scripts, which go through so much changes of your application, right? Having to you know, having to adapt your scenarios which go through changes, and be able to assist you in an automated way in terms of the impact of the changes and so on, right? So I just wanted to kind of cover the breadth of the highlights before I jump into the demo. I do see some questions coming on Question Manager, so I'll take a quick pause. Let's address them, and then we'll dive into the demo. Gretchen, if you can help moderate some of these questions, please.
The first question is from Rashmi. He asks, does automatic test generation mean manual test cases or automation test scripts?
So that's a good question, right? I think, you know, this is where I first mentioned it, right? So automatic test generation, you know, in ACCELQ's world, it means both manual and automation, right? And what it really means is, you know, if we look at it, right, in today's world, majority of the tools, how they you know, go about doing test generation would be either in a recorded play fashion, right, which obviously, you know, for a variety of reasons is getting challenged, right? And that's why we see, you know, Selenium coming up, which is great, but, you know, obviously it comes with its own challenges of overheads and custom frameworks and so on, right? But when I say automatic test generation, what it really means is being able to intelligently, you know, go through your business process, your scenario, and auto-generate all permutations and combinations of your test cases based on the data and your business rules. So hopefully that answers your questions. Any more questions, Gretchen?
Yes, here's another one from Chris. Test strategy, I'm assuming you mean test scope in planning a test suite for upcoming sprint. What automation can be brought into that aspect?
Right. So, you know, we also talked about test strategy in terms of quality lifecycle automation, right? So what that really means, and Chris, thanks for asking that question. What that really means is, you know, right now, if we look at when you do test planning to create that perfect suite to be able to plan a test scope for an upcoming release, you know, unfortunately, you know, today's tools and process, all that allows is, you know, again, you know, the reliance on you know, on traceability, right? But, you know, if you're bringing automation to your test design, if you're you know, having a more intelligent you know, understanding of the business process from a tools perspective, then the tool should be able to assist you with various parameters to be able to help generate that perfect suite, right? So if there is a change made, right, you know, really crawl through not just your scenarios, but also crawl through each and every automation script so that it can assist and tell you that these are the areas which were touched, and if you are creating a test suite for this change to validate, then here are you know, the exact number of test cases you need to execute to be able to validate. Interestingly, there was a survey done that, in general, about 30 to 40% of over testing happens every time, just because you want to kind of play it safe, right? And your tools don't really support any additional level of intelligence when it comes to planning a perfect test suite, right? Because you always want to have perfect coverage with least amount of effort spent on testing, right? That's the balance you want to strike. So hopefully that answers your question. Gretchen, I think I kind of went really fast. So let's take more questions from the next set of questions as well. I see there are more questions coming.
Okay. All right, Vikas asks, what does natural language mean? Is it like the Gherkin syntax?
So that's a good question. I was gonna just show that in the demo as well, right? So natural language, when we say codeless natural language, it actually means purely English, and I'll show that probably best shown in the demo. But it doesn't mean any syntax. I know the behavioral driven tools out there say they are codeless or they're natural language based, but in reality there is a syntax which they follow. So but in our case in ACCELQ there is no syntax, it's purely English, and I'll show that in a few minutes. Any more questions, Gretchen?
Yes, Melinda asks, is ACCELQ platform offered on cloud?
Yes, it is offered on cloud. In fact, the reason we are able to so seamlessly offer it on cloud is because we are a zero IDE platform, right? It's completely browser-based with no kind of overheads. So it is offered. Most of our customers today are using it on cloud, but we do have an on-premise option as well for customers who want to host it on their own. Any more questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, perfect. All right, so maybe a good segue. I'm gonna, jump into my browser, and let's log into the tool itself. And I didn't want to do kind of a hello world kind of demo. So we're picking up a real life application to show you. To walk you through some of the features and capabilities which I talked about, right? So what you see on the screen, I just logged into the browser, right? For a banking application, for a banking application project. And what you see on the left on my screen is something what we call as an application universe. It pretty much is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's think of it as a blueprint of your application. Right, which shows all kinds of transitions and pages. If all these blue circles on the universe represent pages in your application, right? And these arrows which you see going across are nothing but transitions. So if you see from a login page, you can go to like a my account page. So any action you perform on a page will take you to another page, right? So pretty straightforward in terms of the application map itself, right? And this is a majority of this application which you see right here is a UI application. But like I said, it's actually from one of our real life projects, right? So it also has some of these blue circles also represents, for instance, SOAP calls which this application makes to a third-party application. It also includes for some of the business processes. For instance, if you go to any banking website, if you change a password, you know how it sends you an email and you got to go to the email, click on the link, and then it'll open another window. So it actually also includes going externally to, like, for instance, to mail clients to open an email, check, click on the link, and then come back, right? So a real business process, right? A real end-to-end scenario. So this universe is what I'm trying to communicate is that this universe is all inclusive in terms of your UI pages, your non-UI, and what have you, right? Like a real hybrid applications. And obviously it looks complex because it represents your complete application. At any point I can drill down into and then bring a kind of a mini universe. So if I go into, for instance, an account summary page, it shows the mini universe around that page, right? So it shows me all the transitions in and out of that page, right? For instance, from the login page, I can go to account summary page. From account summary page, I can go to, for instance, request, request a checkbook, right? And it'll take me to a checkbook request page, right? So pretty readable in terms of how your application itself performs. And I'll go into some of these details next, right? I can also see the list of these transitions and these actions, right here, and some of these statuses represents the completion of these steps, and we'll get into that in a moment, right? So let me go back to universe. So if you see on the right side of the universe, I have scenarios, actions, and context. And, like I said, it basically is the blueprint, a map of your application, right? So scenarios, what scenarios are, we have about 14 odd scenarios in this application, right? What scenarios are nothing but an end-to-end business process you want to validate, right? For instance, to show you that, let me pick a particular scenario. Let's take this validate fund transfer scenario, right? So it'll filter down my universe, to that specific scenario, right? And it can pretty visually, I can see what are the steps in the scenario. On the right, you can see some of the details. What are the user stories associated with that scenario? We have a native Jira integration, and then you can kind of define how you want to characterize your scenario, right? So in this case, we have priority and module. We have a module tagged to the scenarios. You can kind of customize this to your needs, right? And then if I go to the scenario steps itself, it shows me in pretty English readable terms, right, that what this scenario is all about, right? So it's a validate fund transfer scenario, a typical banking scenario where I'm logging in, I'm checking what my account balance is, and then I'm taking funds from one account, putting it in another account, and just validating, going back to my summary page, validating if the fund transfer took place successfully with the amounts reflecting of the transaction itself, right? And on the rightmost, you see that there are two test cases, and I'll get into that as well, right? So, you must be wondering at this point that so where's the automation magic happening, right? So let me pick one of the steps, right? Obviously in the scenario, this is a business process, and every step here would have the meat behind what steps, what action needs to be taken would be behind these steps, right? So let me take a simple step to kind of show you the actual meat behind these steps, right? So logging into the bank, right? A pretty simplistic step. So how would you log in, right? The way you would log in would be you would enter a username, you would enter a password, and you would just click on the sign in, right? So that's pretty much how you automate in ACCELQ, right? The way you would go about it is basically writing in simple English language, how you want to take that step, right? So your action would be basically the action you want to perform, whether you want to click, whether you want to enter field or what have you, right? And then I made a pretty tall claim of being able to automate a lot earlier, even when my application's not available, right? So I can pretty much write my complete automation code, including down to the level of fields, and I can abstract them even if my application's not available, right? And the way I would write is I don't need to know if I need to, have an enter as a syntax, right? Someone asked this question, right? It works pretty much like how Google autocomplete works, right? So whatever occurs to me, right? If I want to input a field, I would just say input, and it would autocomplete it like Google autocomplete does, right? To enter. So it's intelligent enough to know what you're trying to say so that it autocompletes the commands, right? In this case, if I just say, let's suppose literal, I'm just doing a demo, right? And then if my application doesn't exist, I would just create a new abstract element, right? And I would continue writing all my step details, and then we have a concept of reconciliation where I would just do a reconcile the moment my application's ready, right? And you're basically able to complete your automation code, along with your application, being developed, right? So that you're ready to go, pretty much day one in terms of your automation, right? And and if your application is already available and you don't want to go through this process, since you may be wondering that even this has some level of learning curve, we have a concept of views, right? Which is nothing but a scan of your page, right? So if your application is available or it got available and you are able to scan a view through ACCELQ, all you would do is it automatically identifies all the elements on the page. You have the view ready to go, and the moment I right click on it, it's intelligent enough to understand that this is an input field, so it's automatically suggesting that maybe you want to enter text, and I can just do the same automation coding just through my UI as well. So I don't need to write if I don't want to, or if my application is already available and I just want to go through the process from a UI perspective, right? And complete my automation coding, right? So, for instance, if I right click on the sign in, it automatically identified that this is this is a button, and maybe I want to click this button, right? Because it identified the type of element it is, and so, right? And obviously I'm showing you the most simplistic action in terms of logging in, but there are all kinds of complexities the editor can handle in terms of validations or if loops or what have you, right? So let me take a step back. Right, so if I go back to my scenario, I kind of want to make sure that you get the whole picture, right? So if I go back to my scenario, we picked a fund transfer scenario, and then we went into a particular detail of the step where all the action was happening, so to say, right? And that's why we call each of these steps as actions, right? Because that's where all the action happens, right? So if you take a step back, the real icing on the top comes is as I'm writing my steps, as I'm writing, and defining my pages of my application, what's really happening, and which comes as a part and parcel of going about doing your automation, is every single step you're writing in scenario is becoming reusable because everything is now driven through the map of your application. So think of how you would do, a direction search on Google, right? So once I've written a step, it automatically becomes reusable. So next time I'm creating a scenario, now it'll have all these details as part of my universe, and it'll basically guide me, right? I'll never have to write a login step again, or I'll never have to write a go to account summary and perform changing password. If these are part of my other scenarios, which they would be, right? That's how a complex application and validation of test cases go, right? Everything would become reusable and modular as a part and parcel of going about doing your automation, right? So you're basically avoiding any kind of custom frameworks, and the focus again is not on writing reusability, modularity, or any of those, right? You're bringing it back as a best practice, which is baked as part of the process. Okay, so I've kind of been going at it for a while. Let's take a quick break. I see there are more questions coming in. Gretchen, if you can help moderate.
Yes, of course. David asks, how are elements on page being defined? Is it by name of element?
Okay, I was going to cover that, but I was trying to rush through. So thanks, David, for asking that question. Let me pick a particular, let's see, let me pick a particular action and show you how the elements are being captured, right? So we looked at how we're doing the the writing the automation code itself and the concept of views, right? And I kind of touched on it, the page scanning aspect and where ACCELQ captures the complete view and reads through all the elements, right? So let's look at a particular page. I'm taking an example of an update password page. Right, pretty common page across most of the applications and in banking application, right? It shows me current password, new password, confirm password, and then I go ahead and save, right? So let me pick an element which I can help to answer your question, right? So if you look at this element, right, confirm new password, I just took a sample of it. The way we capture, to answer your question, the elements is basically capturing the complete DOM hierarchy behind that element. Because if you really look at only that element, if I were to only capture it, which majority of the tools today do, is using only the type of the property for that element, I'm gonna actually, let me remove how the tool had by default done it. If you see, if I only used the type property for that element, it actually has 3 matches, and I was not gonna have a good match if I used only that, right? But because we go about using the complete hierarchy, it then looks at its parent, and then you can see actually in real time, right, that there are still 3 matches even after if I go to its parent and use some of the other properties. So then the algorithm, and all this happens in an automated way, right? So you don't really have to deal with this, but if you had to, all this is available to you, right? And then if I go to a further element, then it's saying me, right? It's gone through the complete algorithm cycle of finding me the perfect match based on a parent hierarchy, right? And within that, it's showing me if I were to use these 2 properties along with my type property of the element itself, I will have a perfect match, right? And basically that's how it is able to make a unique match, right? And it goes through this process by itself, right? But if there are more complications you want to handle, you can, like I was playing around with the hierarchy and kind of looking for a perfect match, you can always edit it and figure out a way to to kind of outsmart it as well, right? So hopefully that answers your question. Any more questions, Gretchen?
Yes, we have a couple more actually. Akash asks, you mentioned auto generation of test cases. How are test cases generated from the scenario?
Okay, yes, and I did mention that in the slides, as well as I kind of skipped through the part where we have the scenario steps, and then how these test cases are coming into picture, right? So let me go back. Let me see if I can address it in the most understandable fashion. So if I pick up, let me pick a particular scenario. Let's see if I can pick a scenario where I can show that. Let's pick this one, verify transaction history, right? So if I pick a verified transaction history scenario, you can see, I'm just in a scenario detail page. It's showing me the 5 steps, just like we saw in the other scenario, right? A pretty straightforward scenario, right? You would log into your banking application. You would put your username, password, and then there are always various ways you can search your transaction history, right? You can filter it based on last 10 transactions. You can go to your you can go to your custom date range, and then if you have a checking account, savings account, or a small business account, you can kind of filter it from that perspective, right? So the way ACCELQ has gone about, and thanks for asking this question, right? This is a real a really strong capability which ACCELQ brings to the table, right? Is we've decoupled the concept of maintaining your scenarios, right, to the test cases which that scenarios need to generate to validate various combinations of your business rules, right? So what I mean to say is, if you really think about it, so verifying transaction history is only a 5-step business process, right? And from a screen perspective, it's pretty simplistic, but the amount of test cases which need to be validated based on the various account types, based on various filter criterias of your date range could be a lot many, right? And what ends up happening in today's world, Chris, if you asked this question, right, is you end up maintaining all those permutation combinations of test cases, and your change management becomes a nightmare, right? Because now all of a sudden, if I have 20 combinations of test cases which need to be generated from this business process, all tools, what they'll make you do is basically have you maintain all these test cases as separate test cases, and then obviously comes with the maintenance overhead comes with it, right? So the way ACCELQ goes about it is I picked this scenario to really showcase that test generation capability you asked, right? So if we have these steps defined, all I need to do is generate the test cases based on the combination. And if you look at it, it has automatically picked up what are the different type of account numbers, what are the different type of account types, for instance, a savings account, checking account, right? And whether I'm trying to filter it by transaction count, month, I'm going by last quarter, and then what are the transaction types, right? Whether I just want to see credit transactions or debit transactions, right? And all I have to do is just basically go through a selection process in what I want to execute, and that's it, right? My test cases are auto-generated, right? And again, I'm not, these test cases are generated, for what I'm trying to test, and I'm not maintaining any kind of scripts behind these test cases. What I'm maintaining is my 5 steps, simplistic steps in the scenario, right? And if you're wondering how it was intelligent enough, just like how our modeling is done from a universe perspective, we have a concept of defining your business rules in terms of your data itself, right? So if I were to show you that, if I jump to a particular data type, I can quickly show you, right? So here is an example of account type. So when I would parameterize my account number, I would actually make it of my account type. So when I'm generating my test cases, and it's very business rules, subject matter driven, right? So the whole data driven testing concept is not technically driven from a framework perspective. It's more driven from business rules, and more driven from how a subject matter would define it, right? And if I'm a subject matter expert, the way I would go about doing it is, just defining my business rules for my account type. My account type is checking and savings, and then the various combinations behind it. So when I generate test cases, it automatically took my account number, which is of my account type, and generated all possible permutations and combinations, using various data types, right? Account type, and then I have another data type which is defined for my different filter criteria in terms of date ranges, whether I want debit transaction, credit transaction, and so on, right? So that's how ACCELQ is able to kind of intelligently and fluidly generate these test cases. All right, I think I'm running pretty close to the time, so I'm going to move along. Gretchen, I'm not sure if there are more questions, but let me move along so that I can cover a few more things, yeah? Okay, all right, excellent. And then we'll come back to a few more questions before we end the demo, right? So this all kind of looks well and good, right, in terms of defining your scenarios, having your automation, having everything in place in terms of your reusability and modularity, right? But for an upcoming release, we also talked about test strategy automation, right? So we saw automation in test design, right? We saw automation in test generation. We saw automation in automation itself in terms of, in terms of the handling the overhead of frameworks or complexity or what have you. Let's look at the automation in the test strategy aspect, right? So we have a concept of test suite. So let me pick a quick test suite here, right? So what test suite would mean is, for an upcoming release, you obviously won't validate your complete application every single time, right? So a test suite is a filtered down version of your universe. It only consists of scenarios you want to validate for an upcoming sprint or an upcoming release, right? And how you want to track various metrics as you go along, doing your validations, right? So this is an example of a sprint 3 functional validation, right? It shows the scenarios which are part of it. It also shows me all the stories, along with more of a 360-degree dashboard, right? It's also showing me the development status, from Jira for these stories, and then what are the test cases associated with it. And on the bottom portion, it's also showing me, the coverage level, the test readiness in pretty simple decision-making readable terms, right? What is my execution status? What is my test development status, right? And across my requirements, since it's a requirements-based suite, what is my coverage level as of today in terms of, my scenarios and test cases covering the user stories, right? And I can jump right from here to actually view the results. Right, and it will show me, this is, I think we executed it just this morning. It's showing me probably not the best example. I'll show you some failure examples also, but in this case, it's showing me all the test cases which were executed, right? And I can filter it from various different things, right? So I can filter it by test cases, or I can go back to my scenarios and I can filter it by modules, right, in payment module, or I could go to my user story level of detail, right, which user stories had what test cases associated and so on, right? So let me see if I can quickly pick another test suite, right? I want to showcase. um, let's see if end-to-end test case has all right, let's pick this one. Right, so here it's probably a better mix in terms of the test cases which got executed, and if you want to look at a particular failure, let's suppose I wanted to look at from user story, and I wanted to see that which was the test cases executed for AQ63 and what was the failure about. So right from here I can quickly go down to the level of detail of which scenario got executed. I drill down and it shows me exactly which steps got executed as part of that scenario. And if you look at it, we talked about change management being automated, right? So you see this little plus self-healing sign, right? So, given the way we capture the details of the page and given our automation element identification and the complete, the scenario, the complete process, the way we go about automating, we are able to actually self-heal, elements which get changed at runtime. Right, again, a huge value add. I mean, we're seeing at least 3 times the speed increase, right, with some of these capabilities, right? So if you look at it, in this case, the sign-in button actually changed in the upcoming sprint, right? And there were various strategies which it automatically applied, right? Going through the complete DOM hierarchy, identifying, re-identifying that element, and actually self-healing that automation script on the go, right? And you can see that, right? But anyways, if I go down, it'll actually tell me all the step details. I can go through the screenshot, and if I feel that there was a defect which happened, then I can basically click on the bug icon right here, and I can create a Jira defect. Again, the Jira integration is native, right? So it'll attach all this the steps as well as the screenshots and so on, right? And it's bi-directional, so it'll update my dashboard with the latest set of defects and so on, right? So I know I covered a lot. I kind of really wanted to give an end-to-end overview and showcase, what we really talked about, right? Which is, automation across the life cycle. Any more questions, Gretchen? I know we have just a few more minutes remaining, so let's see if I can address, some last 2 or 3 questions.
Yes, we have a couple here. John asks, you mentioned APA calls in the same flow. How can I make the call to validate the response and continue with UI automation flow?
Okay, so I'll quickly try to show that, right? So let me just pick some action, right? So, this is an action which we earlier looked at, right? Pretty simplistic action which had, entering current password, new password, and so on, right? So within the same flow, let's suppose I had to make an API call. Again, just whatever occurs to me, right? So if I need to make a REST call, all I need to say is REST, and it'll give me all the commands related. I can actually initiate a REST connection right here. It'll auto-complete the complete command for me. All I need to know is the connection name and the value I want to pass, right? Similarly, if you were to make, let's suppose a SOAP call, right? I can actually invoke a GET request right here, and all I need to know is my connection name, right? And the whole technical complexity behind the scene is handled within the same flow. So I could basically make a call, I could validate the response, and then continue with my UI flow pretty much in the same flow. I think I may have some existing, yeah, you see this application actually had one of the steps where I was making REST connections and then coming back to my UI and verifying a particular step, right, as part of my scenario. So hopefully that answers your question. And then in addition to some of these, you can even make database calls, right? So all I need to write is, database, and it'll give me, execute a DB query or what have you, right? Or if you want to make a JMSQ call for one of our customers, we have that, right? Any more questions, Gretchen?
We have a couple. Does the tool support Cloud Lab execution integration?
Yes, so I rushed through that aspect as well. So it does. In fact, our customers are using it both on on-premise test labs, as well as we have native integrations with browsers, with the likes of BrowserStack and Sauce Labs. So we do have customers where who are leveraging Cloud Lab as a part of the execution lab itself. So we have native integrations with both BrowserStack and Sauce Labs.
Okay, one last question. Let's do one more because we're almost out of time. What is the licensing model for ACCELQ, types of users, / modules, etc.?
Okay, perfect. So that's exactly what I wanted to cover towards the end, right? So the licensing model purposely kept very simplistic. It's monthly subscription, no overheads in terms of modules, add-ons, or what have you, right? One user, single user type gets everything, all the bells and whistles. It's a simple monthly subscription model, which actually includes the support, and something which I also wanted to share, right? And I've kind of lived through it in my Mercury HP, and I've kind of seen the pain across the board with all the tools in the marketplace, right? So as you saw in the demo also, very, very user experience driven, very simplistic in terms of adoption. In fact, we've seen our customers adopt it and being able to write their first automation script within the first couple hours, right? So both from a tool adoption standpoint, as well as the speed which it brings from the automation standpoint, and from the from optimizing the life cycle, the quality life cycle, right? So we've already seen our customers really reducing their overall cost up to 50%. And I know we are close to top of the hour, so I just want to quickly thank everyone for attending, and feel free to reach out to us to take a test drive so that you can really kind of experience what the value it brings to the table. So back to you, Gretchen.
Thank you, everyone, for joining and submitting questions. There are some remaining questions, but those will be answered via email after this ends. If you haven't done so at this time, please make sure to go ahead and download the ACCELQ brochure. And again, thank you for attending and participating.
Thank you.